Hello everyone, Darren from DrayTek Australia and New Zealand. In this webinar, I'll go over DrayTek's range of switching products to suit small to medium-sized business applications. When used with DrayTek routers, you can have an integrated platform to manage and configure your network. Note that most new VigorSwitches use a new operating system called DrayOS 5, which is currently being rolled out across the DrayTek product range, and we'll tell you more about it in an upcoming webinar. In most cases, I'll show examples using that, but the same options can be found in DrayOS 4 switches, just usually in a different place in the user interface. We'll start with an overview including the VigorSwitch naming convention, the types of switches available, and SFP options. Next, we'll explore the features, including general functionalities and security measures. Then we'll check out the management tools DrayTek have available, namely Central Switch Management or SWM, which allows centrally managing switches from DrayTek routers, VigorConnect, a local area network tool to manage switches and APs, and VigorACS3, which allows configuring and monitoring DrayTek routers, switches, and APs remotely for multiple networks. Let's start by looking at the VigorSwitch naming convention. The DrayTek VigorSwitch model names hold key information like the VigorSwitch type, the management type, the number of ports, version number, and uplink specification. Let's break it down to understand what each part means. The first and second digits are the VigorSwitch port specification. DrayTek VigorSwitch products are categorized into different series. If the name starts with a G, it means all ports are gigabit. If it starts with a P, it means it's a PoE switch. F means all ports are fiber. X means all ports are 10 gigabit. A Q in the second position means 2.5 gigabit N-base T is featured, and N means 5 gigabit N-base T is featured. So already we can see our PQ2200XB switch here is a PoE switch featuring at least one 2.5 gigabit N-base T port. The third digit is the management type of the switch. Our PQ2200XB has a number 2 there, so we now know it features layer 2 and or layer 2 plus management. The fourth and fifth digits represent the number of ports, so our PQ2200XB has 20 ports. That doesn't necessarily mean they're all RJ45 UTP ports, but it gives us some idea. The sixth digit is the version number. Sometimes a product needs to be updated with a new chipset or mainboard or something, while keeping everything else the same, so manufacturers will release it with a new version number so they know which is which. That's why you see V1, V2, V3 and so on with some products. For our PQ2200XB here, we have a 0, so we know it's the first of its kind. The seventh digit is the bandwidth uplink, meaning if it includes any higher speed ports which can be used for connecting to other switches or devices that can take advantage of speeds beyond 1 gigabit per second. The X here indicates the bandwidth uplink of our VigorSwitch PQ2200XB is 10 gigabits per second. That doesn't tell us the whole story, but at least we know at a glance that it has at least one port that can give us that. If we check out the specs, we find it has 4 10 gigabit per second SFP Plus slots and 16 RJ45 ports that can deliver up to 2.5 gigabits per second. The eighth digit is the maximum PoE power per port. U stands for up to 60 watts and B is up to 90 watts, also known as 802.3 BT or PoE++. If empty, then the switch only provides 30 watts. Just be aware here that not all ports may have the same maximum power. For example, our PQ2200XB here has 4 90-watt ports and 12 ports that will provide up to 30 watts, and 4 unpowered SFP Plus ports. So always read the specs when choosing a PoE switch for your needs. The total power budget is also an important figure to find. You basically need to check the power requirements of each of the devices that need power from the switch, add them all together, and make sure the switch's total power budget is above that figure, as well as making sure the amount of power from each port is sufficient. Okay, so knowing what we now know, let's take a look at the G1282 VigorSwitch. Firstly, is it a PoE switch? No, we can see from the first character that it's a gigabit switch and it doesn't have PoE. If it did, that first character would be a P. How many ports does it have? For that, we look at the third and fourth characters and we can see it has 28 ports. As mentioned, keep in mind that not all of those ports are necessarily of the same type. In this case, the G1282 has 24 standard gigabit ports and 4 combo SFP RJ45 ports. A combo port means that it's a shared resource, which means you can either use the RJ45 port or the SFP slot, not both at once on each of those ports. I'll go into more detail shortly about SFP slots. Okay, for our last question, what is the bandwidth uplink of a G1282? And the answer is 1 gigabit per second because we don't have a Q, N or X on the end to indicate it has any 2.5, 5 or 10G ports. Here's a list of the supported ports for the current switch models. You can pause the video here if you'd like a longer look, or go to the knowledge base article linked down the bottom there, which I'll include in the description below. DrayTek have different types of switches to suit different applications and requirements. Let's take a look at those. For the most part, it's all about the level of management. DrayTek describes these as Smart Light, Web Smart, Layer 2 and Layer 2 Plus. We'll also mention PoE switches as a different class here as well, although in most cases if there's a non-PoE version, there will also be an identical model that does feature PoE. Smart Light switches do everything for you, so their installation is very straightforward. You just plug them in and away they go. They do have some management if needed, including VLAN, QoS, loop prevention and port mirroring. These are great for simple networks when you need more ports, but also want to go next level with VLANs as well. Web Smart models offer more complete functionalities like spanning tree, SNMP, DOS defense and so on. They're suitable for networks needing greater efficiency and scalability. These can also be configured and monitored using the VigorACS remote management platform. Layer 2 management takes things up a level. These are for networks which need a more efficient connection. They offer features like IGMP Querier, GVRP and Surveillance VLAN. They also allow administrators to set up a more secure environment using features such as ACL, 802.1x, IP Source Guard, Radius, TAC ACS Plus and AAA. Layer 2 Plus includes all of the Layer 2 management features plus some basic Layer 3 features such as static routing and a DHCP server. These help improve network performance by taking some of the load off the routers. PoE switches we've already discussed and just means the switch has power over Ethernet functionality built into it. This means you can power devices using network cables like IP cameras, IP phones and PoE access points. DrayTek switches support PoE, PoE Plus and PoE++, depending on the model. Note that the type of PoE standard supported will vary in different switch models. So what's that PoE, PoE Plus and Plus mean? They're different standards of PoE technology which deliver different levels of power over copper UTP, that's untwisted pair Ethernet cable. The original PoE 802.3AF standard, also known as Type 1 PoE, came about in 2002 and delivered up to 15.6 watts and only used 2 of the 4 pairs of wires in UTP cable. PoE Plus 802.38T was ratified in 2009 and could deliver up to 30 watts, still only using 2 of the 4 pairs in UTP cable. PoE++ 802.3BT, also known as 4-pair PoE since it now used all 4 pairs of the UTP cable, came about in 2018. It has 2 versions, Type 3 and Type 4. Type 3 can deliver up to 60 watts, while Type 4 can go all the way to 100 watts. As mentioned earlier, DrayTek switches have differing PoE power budgets. That's the total amount of power the switch can deliver over all available powered ports. That can be anything from 140 watts to 400 watts depending on the model. For example, the P2121X has a 140 watt PoE power budget, while the PQ2200XB, P2280X and P2540X support up to 400 watts. Okay, let's now take a look at the SFP ports available in some models. Our newer switch models support SFP or SFP Plus ports for anyone who requires higher and faster transmission speed. SFP stands for Small Form Factor Pluggable, which allows insertion of a fibre optic module with speeds up to 1 gigabit per second. SFP Plus supports up to 10 gigabits per second speeds. Devices are hot swappable, meaning you can remove or insert the modules without turning the switch off. These interfaces are used primarily in joining LAN segments, that is, uplinks to other switches, but they can also be used to connect to any devices that can take advantage of the extra bandwidth. SFP ports don't have to be used for optic fibre modules. DrayTek have DAC cables available in both 1 and 10 metre lengths. These are a passive copper cable with connectors on the ends which fit the SFP slots. DAC stands for Direct Attached Copper, and they will support both 1 gigabit per second and 10 gigabits per second speed. In many cases, these can be an easier and more cost-effective option than optic fibre. SFP and SFP Plus are industry standards, so all brands of optic fibre modules should fit and work fine. However, for some reason we occasionally come across one that just won't play nicely. Here we have a list of one brand of SFP modules which we recently tested and found to work fine with DrayTek switches. I'll include a link to our test results in the description below. Let's now take a deeper look at some of the VigorSwitch features, some of which I mentioned briefly earlier. First up, we have link aggregation. Link aggregation allows you to combine multiple physical links into one logical link to deliver higher bandwidth, as well as increased resiliency for Ethernet LAN connections. In DrayOS 4 switches, you'll find link aggregation under the Switch LAN option in the menu. In DrayOS 5, you'll find it under Configuration, General Setup, Link Aggregation. Once there, select plus add link aggregation. Select the ports to become part of link aggregation. Select static as aggregation type. The advanced mode options are port enabling, port speed, and flow control. There's also additional steps required to set it up in the router. For a full setup guide, I'll include a link below to the application note down the bottom there, which goes through it. Another feature is port mirroring. This is a handy diagnostic tool in DrayTek VigorSwitches to forward ingress and egress traffic, that is TX and RX packets, from selected switch ports to a switch port that's connected to a network analyzer. In DrayOS 5 switches, go to Configuration, General Setup, Mirroring, select the mirrored port and the destination port. This page enables administrators to customize how the system handles multicast packets. You can choose actions for dealing with unknown multicast packets and decide on the handling of known packets based on MAC address, IP address, and VLAN ID. The Spanning Tree Protocol, STP, serves as a fundamental network protocol, diligently ensuring the establishment of a loop-free topology within bridged Ethernet local area networks. This page provides the ability to activate STP and configure the associated settings such as BPDU and path cost method. Also, you can define parameters such as bridge priority, STP forward delay time, time interval in seconds, TX hold count, and STP hello time in seconds. The quality of service QoS feature is found in higher-end VigorSwitches. Here, traffic on certain ports can be prioritized. Traffic can be tagged for QoS by using COS, DSCP, or IP precedence. Some VLAN traffic types, such as voice and surveillance VLANs, can also be tagged for quality of service. Jumbo frames. Here you can customize the switch port jumbo frame settings within a valid range of 1526 bytes to 10,000 bytes. The next tab along in DrayOS 5 switches is LLDP, that's Link Layer Discovery Protocol. Here that can be enabled and various settings altered. Moving on to VigorSwitch security features. WebSmart and above DrayTek VigorSwitches have several security features built in, including Access Control List, ACL. This manages network access by defining rules for permitting or denying traffic. IP Source Guard prevents IP spoofing by restricting traffic to valid source IP addresses. Storm Control mitigates broadcast storms by limiting excessive traffic on the network. DOS, Denial of Service Protection, safeguards against DOS attacks by detecting and mitigating malicious traffic. IP Conflict Prevention identifies and prevents IP conflicts, ensuring network stability. Loop Protection guards against network loops, maintaining optimal performance and preventing disruptions. Port Recovery automatically recovers from port issues, enhancing network reliability and minimizing downtime. Let's check those out in a little more detail. First up, ACL. An access control list is a sequential list of permit or deny conditions applied to IP addresses, MAC addresses, or other specified criteria. Packets are tested against these conditions, accepting or dropping based on matching rules. Users can create ACLs for Layer 2 filtering, that's a MAC layer, or Layer 2 to Layer 4 filtering for both IPv4 or IPv6. IP Source Guard is like a bouncer for your network. It stops bad actors from pretending to be good ones by checking their IP addresses. This security feature needs separate settings for each network entrance, that's the Gigabit Ethernet GE or LAG port, to do its job effectively. Storm Control acts like a traffic cop for your network, preventing excessive broadcasts, unknown multicast, or unknown unicast traffic. It sets a limit on the rate of these packets. This page allows you to adjust overall storm control settings and configure specific port settings. The outcomes of these configurations for each port are displayed in a table on the lower part of the web page. A denial of service DOS attack is an attempt by hackers to block access to a device, overwhelming it with fake communication requests and causing it to ignore legitimate traffic. This leads to a CPU overload on the targeted device. The DOS protection feature consists of predefined rules designed to defend the network against such malicious attacks. And these are a concern on the LAN just as much as from the internet. If a PC is compromised, it can be turned into a DOS machine. I even once saw a network printer with bad firmware bring a network to a halt. IP conflict prevention. When users manually configure IP addresses for network devices, there is a risk of conflicts arising when different devices end up using the same IP address. This can lead to a disruption in the network or device functionality. To address this, IP conflict prevention firstly offers a solution by allowing users to bind specific ports with designated IP addresses. This proactive measure ensures that IP conflicts are avoided, promoting the seamless and correct operation of the network devices. Secondly, the switch can take action if a conflict is detected. There are two modes in the prevention level. In detect-only mode on a VigorSwitch, the system identifies the presence of a host but refrains from taking any additional action. This mode serves as a passive monitoring state, allowing the switch to recognize the host without implementing any automatic response or intervention. Alerts can be configured to be sent to a specified email address for a heads up if this ever occurs, so you can then take manual action as necessary. Slide the slider to detect and block mode on a DrayOS 5 VigorSwitch, and the system identifies a host and takes a proactive measure to block it if it aligns with the configuration on the corresponding settings page. For example, protected hosts can be configured so no one can knock out an important network resource for everyone. Instead, they just knock themselves out. Network loops can have a similar effect to a DOS attack, flooding the network with unnecessary traffic and slowing it down, and also causing routers and switches to bog down. Loop events on a VigorSwitch, possibly resulting from incorrect hardware connections, prompt periodic packet checks. This page enables users to define conditions and specify actions for the VigorSwitch to take when looped packets are detected, aiding in the identification and resolution of potential network loop issues. Port recovery. The switch can block ports if they meet certain criteria. This page serves as the configuration hub for defining settings to automatically recover a blocked port after a predefined time interval. It basically allows setting a timeout for naughty devices to see if they start to play nicely afterwards, which will save the admin having to rush in to sort it out every time. DrayTek have some tools that can manage VigorSwitches from other interfaces, making configuration and deployment a lot easier. There are 3 management platforms that can be used to manage and configure VigorSwitches. These are Central Switch Management, SWM, VigorConnect, and VigorACS3. Central Switch Management is a feature in DrayTek Vigor routers that provides a central console to manage and deploy supported VigorSwitches. It also simplifies setting up VLANs on the switch to match the settings on the router. On the status monitoring page, the router presents a hierarchical view of the VigorSwitches on its LAN, where you can easily find a device in the network topology. The coloured icons show the different states of the switch ports. These include uplink and downlink ports, if ports are in use or are available or are in shutdown mode. Clicking on a switch port will show the port status. Here you can see port information, and you also have the option to shut the port down. The router offers a simple method to plan VLANs on the VigorSwitch. It presents the VLANs available according to the router's configuration. The port connecting to the router is automatically set to a trunk port, and you only need to define the PVID when a port is a member of multiple VLANs. In the switch status menu, you can see the status of all the attached switches at a glance. You can see the switch name, its IP address, the model number, and system uptime. You can also see how many ports are in use on each of the switches, as well as how many clients are connected. In the Central Switch Management Maintenance section, you can back up or restore the switch configuration. You can also reboot the switch or reset it back to factory default settings. VigorConnect is another central management solution for VigorSwitches. This one is a free app that you can install on a PC. It uses the TR069 protocol, the same as our VigorACS management platform, and can be used to manage up to 100 VigorSwitches on a LAN. It's been covered in detail in a webinar we ran previously. I've included a link to that in the description below. Some of the key features of VigorConnect are device discovery, where all the VigorSwitches will be discovered and auto-configured to add to VigorConnect. Provisioning, where pre-configured profiles can be uploaded to each switch. Real-time network status monitoring will send you a notification if a switch has lost network connectivity. Visibility provides insight about the VigorSwitch as well as CPU usage over a specified period. And maintenance tasks such as a firmware update or configuration backups can be done according to a time schedule. Setting up VLANs is also simplified when using the graphical view in VigorConnect. The last central management system that can be used for VigorSwitches is VigorACS3. This software is subscription-based with licensing available to suit different sized networks. It has all the features of VigorConnect, but it can manage a greater number of devices based on the software license, and it can also manage devices anywhere on the internet, not just a local area network. VigorACS3 was covered in great detail in our ACS3 webinars playlist, and I'll include a link to that below. Pro tip, most of our videos have English subtitles. If your English is pretty good, you can save time by turning the subtitles on and watching the videos in double speed. And we've come to the end. In this session, we covered various types of switches, naming conventions, and some information about SFP ports and PoE. We also explored different features in VigorSwitches, including link aggregation, port mirroring, and QoS. We also looked at the security features available, including ACL, IP source guard, storm control, and more. And finally, we wrapped up with a look at 3 ways to monitor and manage VigorSwitches. That included central switch management in DrayTek routers, VigorConnect in a local environment, and VigorACS3 for remote management. We also have a couple of other switch webinars available, and I'll include links below to those. Okay, that's all for now, but please stay tuned. If you have any questions, we'll be available in the live chat on the right of your screen for the next 5 minutes. For more information about DrayTek products, please check out our website at www.draytek.com.au or send us an email to sales@draytek.com.au or give us a call on 02 9838 8899. Please like and subscribe below, and if you'd like a notification anytime we put up a new video, please select all from the subscribe drop-down menu as well. Thanks and bye for now.